start sharing the slides, please feel free to introduce yourselves.
Okay, I can step in first. My name is Dom Freschi, go by Dom, Customer Success Director at Openprise. Background in neuropsychology, went into operational data work, both on the marketing and RevOps side, now helping customers build out what they can with Openprise.
And I'm Courtney Sylvester. I am the Director of RevOps at Openprise. And so Openprise is also a RevOps company. So we get some pretty wild ask from a company where your leaders know that you can kind of do anything. So we have fun, but we're able to build a lot at our organization. And so Dom's helping customers do that. I help our teams do it.
Well, you can't be everywhere all at once. Another sci-fi reference. I'm Camela Thompson. I'm head of marketing at the RevOps Co-op. Before that, I spent 15 years in operations spanning sales, marketing, and customer success. I've managed databases. I've managed CRMs, marketing automation platforms, customer success platforms. Basically, if you need it fixed, just point me at it. And I'm so stubborn, I just don't give up. We're going to talk through where we're seeing people struggle with AI and what people jump into before they lay a foundation. We're going to talk about what's working in the market. Courtney's going to share some amazing workflows that she has done with her team that I'm very excited about. And then we're going to do some Q&A. I saw it in RevOps AF Berlin, and I felt it a lot in RevOps AF New Orleans. We had a ton of people pitching AI topics. We had a ton of people running to the sessions. We were very lucky in that a few of them were extremely in-depth and detailed, but a lot of them are high-level theory. The FOMO is real. Everybody feels like they need to try it, master it, play with it, do all the things. Or we're stuck in this world of overwhelm because there's just so much of it and so many ways you can combine different tools or try different things. Plus, we're being pressured by our executive team to try wild things like cold outbound with AI. Tom and Courtney, are you seeing the same thing? Are you feeling this in the market?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this at RevOps staff, and I talked to a lot of people after that presentation about how sometimes it's just not knowing where to jump in. A lot of times, like if you're using a GPT wrapper or something like that, it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be. It looks very easy on LinkedIn. Everybody wants to make everything seem super simple. But what this usually ends up being is yet another tool for ops to manage. And that's if you have ops. If you don't have ops to manage this, I honestly don't know what people are doing who are figuring everything out themselves. But you need someone who ends up being pretty technical most of the time, because it's not just, let me press play on this and then everything's going to be perfect. You have to iterate, pay attention to the outputs, and you really need to know your data and pay attention to basically everything if you're going to run something like this and be really careful with it.
Yeah, we led with a joke for our presentation. Since we started our presentation, there are 16 new AI tools out, published, ready. They're going to make your revenue charts skyrocket to the right? It's honestly going to be this revolutionary, transformative product. And it can be, but I do, in agreement with both of you here, is that it's going to take more work than people are anticipating. Companies want to say they are using AI because they want to have that boost. They want to have that kind of news notoriety. But truthfully, how operational teams are going to be able to leverage it takes a lot of planning, a lot of work, and it's still a lot of hands-on time. You can get wonderful, transformative things for your outputs. But in truth, what we're seeing for customers is they have to figure out what it's being used for, not just that they're using it.
And you don't need it for everything.
No, you don't. Do you need machine learning?
Do
Do you need automation? Or do you actually need AI?
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about before this is the most important things to understanding your customer and understanding the business is not scalable. And that's getting context from everything around you to make sure that you are doing things with an intention and purpose. Rushing into implementing something like cold outbound when you haven't figured out your target audience, your messaging, like all of these really foundational things, you're just scaling really bad practices. And yeah. I think AI is also a really great way to scale errors and mistakes. So it is important to start with small populations and approach things with purpose. I think this feeds really well into the next point. Instead of tackling something we haven't figured out or even started to approach figuring out what are the things we see that are approachable? What are things that we know AI is good at? Dom has a great point about how AI isn't really designed to be accurate and go and gather all the facts and summarize them in a really factual. It's meant to sound human first. How do you see that playing out in some of the false starts you've seen? Courtney, feel
Yeah.
free to jump into.
No, yeah, I've seen it with a couple of customers because we are working with some customers on how they want to implement. At Openprise, we do have an internal large language model that's on our own servers and stuff. So it's not one that's reaching out to the internet for things. But what we've seen within that is that kind of bias towards making sure that they deliver a result versus the accuracy of that result. Some of the initial pieces we saw were, hey, we want to use very low key kind of replace some of the management. What we're seeing a lot of it is a way to automate or update how they're managing some reference data sets. For instance, taking job titles and throwing out a job level, job role, doing some of those segmentation pieces. We do see a lot of possibility there, but we did see early on a lot of hallucinations, both in the sense of it was making a decision on a, say, job level, and then changing what it determined was the input job title to make its decision because it was uncertain. And so just like if a human is uncertain in a situation, they may get flustered, say something, they may lie, they may even make things up to make it seem like they're doing things correctly. And so we did see some of those results early on. We've worked on our prompt engineering to help improve and get rid of those, but it's something that's always going to be inherent in the system because it's not A plus B equals C. It's more of an inference than an actual equation that AI is going to be generating.
Matt had one of the most extreme examples I've heard of where he uses ChatGPT extensively and Clay for social media. He was trying to get it to generate an image, and it's like, I can't do that. And he's like, he had to tell it, yes, you can. I've seen you do it. And then it's like, oh yeah, you're right. And then it would start kind of going again. Courtney, how have you seen this manifest?
I think that what I come back to when I see this the most is the blank slate problem. I see people walk up and they're like, we have AI now. What am I going to do with it? What a terrible question to ask. You have 10 trillion problems. Why are you creating new ones to create more problems with? Being realistic about what your problems are in the organization is going to be a really huge thing. And you have that on the slide here, but I really can't say that enough. I'm going to tell you guys something. I did not think I understood what agents were for a very long time. And I've been building stuff out with APIs and doing all this stuff since a lot of this came out. Like, what are people, is everybody understanding something that I don't? They're just a series of prompts. So I see these people just starting and making these massive agents that are just a series of prompts that are pulling from different pieces of information. And often, to your point, Kamala, you're seeing the errors are going to be compounded and expounded as you keep going. And everyone's like, okay, I solved it. Look, I have this agent and it does everything perfectly. You cannot do it that way. You're not helping your organization when you just build something and then walk away from it. You need to make sure that everything you're doing has checks, has balances as you keep going, that you're paying attention to it. For me, I set up flows to check the flows and things like that so that nothing crazy is really happening. But, when I think about helping an organization, that's like the easiest way to hurt your organization is just to dive in way too quickly without really testing more than one record where it worked well that one time.
Yeah.
And there are some things, go ahead.
No, to piggyback on what Courtney said, it's starting, like you're with a blank slate, and humans throughout time have always kind of struggled. You have a blank piece of paper, blank screen, where do you start? Where do you begin? Start in small use cases, which is kind of what we're not tiny, but in problematic things that you need some extra compute power. You need some extra creativity to help solve today. Start small, check the input, check the output, make sure things are working. And as Courtney said, she's been diving into what some of the AI tools have been able to do for a couple of years now. But it's really until you start in that small and build your skill with it, as well as learn what to expect, the nuances. You can build to these grander things. You give yourself time to learn, and you give the company time to understand, okay, here are the controls, here are the things for governance, here's kind of what the general projects that are going to be. You give yourself those building blocks over time.
roadblocks we're seeing. I'm going to let you both tackle these. We've seen them all.
Yeah, and when we covered this in New Orleans, this really was not only the roadblocks you're going to encounter, but also the things that may push you. We start with executive directives, and the company made a splash, has a massive contract with OpenAI, Anthropic, any of these large teams to say, okay, we're going to start using AI in a lot of our tools. So then they hand it down to operational teams and say, cool, use this. You're going to hit that roadblock immediately of, cool, how do I use this? Or the inverse, where we actually got a great question. We got a great question after, which was, we have team members that want to use it, but our team is saying we can't. Executives are saying, okay, or IT teams saying they can't. We've seen conversations around the capability interest misalignment for these solutions, and it doesn't address that, or it's not something that, there's going to take a lot of work to get it to address those. How it was, how we're onboarding, how we're implementing it may be problematic. And then also who's in charge of it internally. And these are all pieces, part of those conversations that you need to go through before you even think about starting with one of these tools. As you said, Courtney said it, Camela said it as well, you're going to have these errors that are going to compound over time. So unless you have these controls and pieces in place, you're going to run into these roadblocks no matter what. Having an answer for them upfront helps you to scale to what you need to do.
I had this interesting comment the other day. Someone was saying they'd been through a major event in SaaS, and then we all went through this phase of evaluating our tech stack and trying to make it as lean as possible instead of having a bunch of point solutions. And this person was extremely hesitant and kind of judgmental of people who use a lot of point solutions right now. While there are some purpose-built tools, I feel like we're in this point in time where this hasn't been figured out by any means, and we're still learning which use cases, which tools work best when, where it might make sense to experiment a little bit. What are your feelings on that?
I think that what we see now is going to be completely different than we're going to see in 6 months. So learn all you can, but learn the underlying tech as much as you can. Don't hitch your wagon to one company who has one way of doing things. I think understanding on a higher level is going to make a lot of sense for people. I saw a comment from somebody today, I don't remember, on like LinkedIn, just that like RevOps is getting more technical again. We kind of moved away from it for a few years, and there was a lot of talk about compensation, but I think RevOps is about to get, and marketing ops and sales ops, I don't know where everybody's at, but like CS ops, all of you guys, we're about to get a lot more technical again. And I think that's how we kind of keep our jobs on some level, but also, yeah, I think things are going to look really different, and we have no idea how this is going to end up looking. I do assume that a lot of the bigger companies are eventually going to buy out some of these small ones, or they'll sort of just disappear as they build more of this into their big point solution, stay stuck in their product for all of eternity, because that's what they want. But yeah, I think that we have no idea what's going to happen, and I wouldn't make any bets on anything really, especially system wise.
So Andre says, one of my mandates is to re-engineer the go-to-market tech stack and AI as much as possible, either to string it together or replace. That speaks to both your point that our roles are getting more technical again, but also this disconnect between wanting to make things as lean as possible. And the rule of thumb with AI, unlike everything else, is try, instead of try, pivot, try. So it's really hard to abandon things and not retest them when you see them start to work in certain use cases. I'm going to keep us moving just so we can get to the really meaty stuff. So let's talk through these points, and then I'll get to Nicholas's question.
Yeah, as we've talked about the problems that a lot of people have been encountering, that Courtney herself has encountered when building things internally. I've had conversations with customers about how they're having to approach this. The top level one is something that we've preached from the get-go, which is you really have to understand what are the right use cases for your RevOps team, for your tech stack, for the problems that you face. You have to understand what the problem actually is. For instance, if you're trying to understand why, I know one of the things Courtney has been looking at, and she can speak to as well, which is why are we losing opportunities at certain stages, or why aren't opportunities moving to a certain stage? There's a lot of data and a lot of things and a lot of ones and zeros we can look at. That could be something where we could use something, some kind of contextual intelligence to understand the data, look for patterns, and help uncover things. But that's like taking one problem that we all have faced at one point or another and be able to point something specifically at it and say, I have this problem, help me understand what's going on here, versus tell me all about my sales cycle. Because that's not going to get you the same kind of contextual intrinsic information that you're going to be able to use.
Yeah, that is a problem that everybody has. And I don't think we're addressing it. I'm taking each date for each stage that we have and pulling every gong call, every email, every single thing that we have within that date range to look at these piecemeal to try to understand what's going on prior to that. We're not just looking at somebody's close loss notes. And that's just using this as a summary, but it's also a summary that's sort of in a silo. I'm not asking it to expand on other things it guessed about, because summarization is going to be guessing. And things like this can be really, really helpful. You can build them out and edit them, but really these are things that I don't want to go read all the emails and listen to every gong call for every single deal at a certain stage. I'd quit. I couldn't do it. AI doesn't get burnout. I would get burnout from something like that. When you're thinking about your strategy, think about tasks that would burn you out, things that, a problem you've always had. Try to start with things like that. We have data quality in here, which is super boring, but if you can use AI to help improve your data inputs, you have to make sure what's going in is correct. And then you still have to monitor any hallucination or anything else that happens, but you got to start with something decent to begin with, or, crap in, crap out.
The only thing I would add is never lose sight of the end user. I've had so many managers come to me and say, it would be so cool and helpful for my team if the system could do XYZ. And I talk to their team and they're like, no, I really just need to be able to sort through these leads faster to figure out what I should be going after. So make sure you're getting the business context and that you're talking to end users. Don't create something because it sounds like a really good idea. Bounce it off people first before you put the work into it. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut.
No, honest
action too on it. Like everything you do should be actionable. It shouldn't just be their dashboard for people to never look at again.
As we know through years with marketing ops, RevOps, reporting, oftentimes the most basic thing solved well can be the most impactful. If that's where AI can help, when we say consolidate issues that overlap, it truthfully, what are the problems or issues that have the greatest impact for multiple teams, for multiple reports, for multiple things that you're trying to accomplish? Having it help with those will be the most impactful. It's not going to be this amazing semi-intelligent model that you were able to build out necessarily, but if you can take away some friction, address some of these problems, or get insights on an issue, that's going to speak volumes to teams.
So the question is, what do you guys think is worth learning or bolstering nowadays in terms of tech skills, programming languages, system architecture, data mining? When I interview somebody for a revenue operations role, I care less about certifications. What I look for are people who understand basic data structure, tables, how they relate to each other, basic formula logic, and then can take a verbal set of requirements and translate that into workflows like visuals and how things should operate together. I want them to think through the business context, ask questions, and then be able to visually workflow things. So I look less for programming skills because I know SQL and I've used it so many times. I didn't think I'd continue using it, but with ChatGPT and other AI, it's much easier to supplement that. What I care more about is somebody being able to take business requirements and be able to translate them into logical steps, because that's going to be so helpful in terms of taking business requirements and actually doing something with them. What are you two seeing, and do you disagree?
I don't disagree overall, but I am learning a lot more programming languages right now. I am super interested in it. I've been building out a lot of my own API connections, not using like any intermediaries. But that's because I want to. And now I don't have to use I don't have to use a lot of other companies because I can just directly pull that information in how I want to. The reason I'm learning more about this is because I have spotty information on some of this stuff. I've taught myself over the years, and I would be faster at troubleshooting if I had a better grounding. So that's what I'm doing, but that's not what everyone's going to do. I would say whatever you end up doing, it's got to be something you're interested in. I don't know that it's necessary for anyone's role. I don't really think it is, but I'm getting a lot more technical, but it's because I also want to. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I no longer thing tells me that doesn't hook up to this system. I'm like, oh, yes, it does. And I'm able to do it myself now. So that's really fun for me. But, I would say
Yeah. Also realize it. Sorry.
We always want to start right after Courtney. I do actually believe that with the way AI systems are built today, the truly technically minded people are going to be the most successful with it because they will first know to check the inputs and outputs for accuracy. Prompt engineering is a whole field in and of itself right now because it's burgeoning. There's handbooks and guides and videos and all these things, but to truly understand what is needed technically, you have to first know the technicalities. Over time, the requirement for that technicality is going to decrease. I do also think at some level, I think some that can translate between technical and business speak are always going to be valuable, but those that can dive deeper into both sides are going to be the truly irreplaceable when it comes to this, because when it's one of the issues I've always felt is you have to be able to explain how the AI got to that result. Because so often, or is there going to be an output for something? We've all seen it with reports, models, things where they go, cool, where did you get that data? What is it saying? What is the actual operation going on? Versus just, line go up. It's really got to be, how are we getting to that? And if you can only say, well, I entered a prompt through a table that I didn't understand and it did some magic and gave me an output, sorry, here's the door, have a nice severance. We really do need those people who can sit there and translate, but know to some degree what's going on. That's at least my opinion on it.
I think we've talked about this quite a bit, but are there some points you want to touch on before we go into specific examples?
No, I think
Covered that.
clear.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about a few of these. The other folks on the panel are going to talk about a few of these. We want to get into the actual workflows, but so I want to talk about what I'm seeing work in the market. I had this really amazing, I got to sit in a session in RevOps AF Berlin, and someone actually sat through and showed how they were using Clay as a connector and not the enrichment source. And then we're pulling in a ton of different data sources and AI tools within a table and then serving it back to Salesforce. What was really cool about it is they thought beyond just your standard enrichment, first name, last name, industry, blah, blah, blah. They actually were helping a security company scrape the web, news reports on data breaches. They were using ChatGPT to summarize and serve up sources to salespeople because AI is never going to be trustworthy 100%, at least not how it's structured now. But we can give salespeople the tools to see whether or not this is super legit, and we should be using this as part of our outreach. And what I'm seeing a lot of some companies are kind of all in one. It's purpose built. You've got AI that's part of the tool. And I'm also seeing people incorporate AI in workflows at certain steps when they're not using AI for every logic step, at least from what I've seen. Where I've seen people struggle is trying to use AI to write the entire workflow, but having it help you write better specific prompts, test it, ask it why it's doing something and how to make it better, that I see work really well. Do you want to dig into any of these specific examples and how you've seen it work?
Yeah, summarizing seems kind of boring, but it's really not. I use it a lot for just have it on the background of like your outreach, sales enablement whenever someone calls someone, it's not actually like giving you a pitch, but it gives you information, a summarization of like previous opportunities or previous times this person's been spoken to. So you don't look like a jerk when you're calling and you have no idea what's going on. You don't know that they went through a deal. I mean, people shouldn't do that, but we know they do. So summarization of information that you have in Salesforce, summarization of things that are in the news. And so when you can think of those things and be more creative, I think that's the key here too. You need to know your business and be a little creative in some of these things, finding these use cases that can set you apart and be useful for your teams. And every team's going to be different in how they do things as well. Like I don't use it as much for documentation. I should, because I'm also just garbage at documenting things. But like I use it for Python and SQL all the time, I get very wrong answers, but I then troubleshoot and fix it. So you have to know that everything you're going into, I think the ability to troubleshoot is something that's going to be very important to moving forward.
Critical thinking, my God. Dom?
I think the most impactful of these are the ones where, yes, you're going to be able to kind of ask it for some piece of information, net new, like you mentioned, help me out with some of these kind of coding exercises, or can you help provide me some information, right? The most impactful ones to me are going to be the ones where you're feeding it information and asking it to then reprocess and reformat. The first three, where you're either giving it data to summarize, asking it to document things based on information you've provided, pointing it to a resource, or that tech stack mapping, having it be able to build out some kind of a workflow based on a spreadsheet, order of operations, those things could potentially help that person translate the tech stack, help them understand what's going on and be able to translate that into a more accessible format.
Andre was asking for specific. I spend a lot of time in Canva, Figma, Miro, doing visual workflows of how data flows through systems. I love doing a tech stack map because it's always a great way to throw that up on the board and have the executives go, oh, this is why it's so hard. I've found that AI has gotten much better at reading visuals. So I'll upload the visual and say, give me a spreadsheet of all the systems, and then maybe add some columns on what they do. And it's getting really good at that. And I stole that from somebody else at RevOps AF, and it works really well. If I could wave a magic wand and make RevOps better at anything, it's when I know I have a really big project, I take a bunch of benchmarks and then I measure a month after the project, 3 months and 6 months, throwing that into ChatGPT and saying, hey, here are the findings, write me a summary email I can send to the executive team on why this project was worth doing. You're selling your value, your team's value to the business, and it's something that we need to get better at. This is an easier way to do it.
Yeah, I love that idea. I haven't done that, and I definitely need to.
And then put it on your resume. Key findings. That's life-changing. I found the workflows you should be using now. Lead to account matching can be good at helping write the fuzzy logic necessary to match things, but you have to double check and test on a small population before you blow it up in your org. That's something that's really important to get right. Scoring, I have strong feelings about as a marketer, but I've seen organizations that swear by it. Enrichment across multiple sources. I love involving humans in this and going to marketing and sales and saying, here's what we found, which should be the winner in each category. And we'll use that going forward because we all know enrichment sources are good at some things and not at others. Using summarization to eliminate the need for salespeople to fill out next steps on their opportunity to progress has been really good. And then using call recording software to append opportunity contacts to improve attribution and campaign visibility. This is a huge one for marketers and takes a pain in the butt step off the plate of sales. And then, of course, getting creative with lead routing, enrichment, scraping, finding things that are important to the business in order to segment things. Does anyone want to add to this before we get to Courtney's specific example?
I don't think that I would really use it for lead to account matching right now. You might use it as a step within it, but I think that's pretty dangerous. And I don't know how everyone on this call is, but I have to imagine you have some wild rules that exist for lead routing and lead to account matching.
Clarify, it was for helping write the logic, and then you test the logic.
I do know some people are using these for some of this stuff. I would really hazard people not to do that just yet. I don't think it's just not.
If there's some intuitiveness involved, then yes, of course. Or if it's like I said, grabbing information, transforming it. But yeah, if you do need that like routing capability to say, based on these criteria, it's the output. Yeah, of course, right? That's still deterministic. You still want that to be an exact path. But if you need to uncover patterns, if you need to find other types of information, or as it gets more advanced, you can step into what I would assign an intern or an entry-level person to do, understand, read through, and grab information. One of the ways that we've heard folks at Openprise talk about is for enrichment, combining it with a Google search API, getting a kickback on the number of franchises for a certain company, Google will have that, what it delivers back, using the AI to read through that, grab that piece of information and drop that in. It's a way to get enrichment of non-traditional sources of information, but you have to feed it the information first through a deterministic process. It can't be just tell me all these things, because you want it to be sourced. You want to be able to point back to something. But it definitely opens up for a lot of these a secondary possibility, but I would always start deterministic first and then add the complications.
Do you want to go first?
One thing I love about AI now is we've all been using the same call software for years, and they have AI capabilities, or so they say they do, but you're completely beholden to what inputs they put in to get that information out. And I listened to a call and I didn't feel like the summary was actually accurate, didn't catch like tone, or it didn't catch things I want. So the ability now for me to go back, put these calls through something and pull out information I care about right now, like urgency, I think that's really awesome that now we can actually look at all this data, all this information we had before, but we're not waiting on somebody else to decide what a summary should be. I can decide what a summary should be, or I have a lot more control over it at least.
Yeah, and for me, that was the moment where I'm like, oh, this call recording software is no longer a nice to have. We need to have it because of how much we can mine out of it. Before I was like, nobody's going to take the time to get what we need out of this information. Yeah. So the question was, for lead to account matching, how do you suggest dealing with poor data quality?
It depends on what you have, but I pick every piece of information I can out. The first thing, like you're getting an email, pull the email. I try not to match on company anyways. I always try to match on website or something like that. If it's direct to consumer, that's going to be different, but require a business email. If they give you a fake email, it's a fake lead. That would be my suggestion. Paywalls aren't going to work as well as they used to, but trying to get that email and get something that you can hard match is going to be better. Data quality, there's a lot more out there now that's a lot less expensive than it used to be. Take a look at trying to enrich things a little bit differently than you used to. This is a good example of something that like I tried this years ago. It's too expensive. I couldn't do it. It's time to take a look at what's out there again and see if you can't get some better matches or some cheaper data to at least clean some of this up beforehand.
Yeah, for lead to account matching, I would always recommend relying on things that are more standardized. So company name, right? You have different spellings, different spacing, Inc., LLC, is that information included? Yeah, there's a lot of things that can standardize, but you're still reliant on what they typed in. If they typed in an email and it's got a domain, you can always compare that up to other contacts, compare that up to other accounts in your system. There are ways to work around it. But again, I think the ultimate she mentioned there is finding something that can help you standardize and enrich to where you're leveling the playing field a little bit for the data that's going to be compared. It's going to be probably the most impactful, but it's never going to go away. Like I've seen people try to do a company name match with AI to say, look for these records in this field that seem similar. But remember, these tools are built for sounding human, not for full accuracy. There's a lot of interpretation that's going to go on there. So it's really about what information you have, what works best for your use case and your company, and really trying to rely on things they have to type correctly, like an email. Because if there's a typo in an email, you're kind of out of luck a little bit overall. Company name, I've seen typos in those all the times. I've made typos in my own. Email, though, if I want that communication, I'm going to make sure that's typed correctly. So you can always use that information as well.
Yeah, going off the domain is great advice in addition to layering in IP country information. If you have a really complex enterprise sale with the knowledge that in a remote world, it's never going to be 100%. They're going to have to use a bit of research, but maybe scraping LinkedIn could help. One thing I would add to all the great advice here is that not all data is created useful. Interrogate your sales and marketing teams as to what is most important for understanding your segments, and then having bake-offs with enrichment companies to figure out which ones are best at those specific things. And that will help you narrow down what to invest in instead of investing in a lot of tools for like getting mobile phone data is always going to be hard. So that's probably not the best idea. Focus on what your company really needs for enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Courtney, take it away.
Yeah. One of the things I guess I do like a ton of data mining is from LinkedIn profiles. So it's not just like, I want to find out about this person. We do things like trying to figure out mirroring and using language that they use. We also have things like Gaggle that Everyone says the same thing, but it's kind of difficult. One of my favorite use cases of LinkedIn is data validation. I'll go through that in the next slide. Trying to figure out what a company cares about. If you're looking at their account, at the account level, at the person level, yeah, see their posts, see what they're doing, but really figure out, is this the previous company? Can you match that to someone in Salesforce that you already have? Can you pull that mobile phone number that you already have that worked and move it over? Using like the LinkedIn URL really should be everybody's new kind of domain or email, because now you're able to match people from record 1 to 2 to 5, and it's become like my favorite thing. So one of the things I try to make sure I do is that, no offense, data providers, you guys give so many bad LinkedIn URLs for the wrong person. So I'm validating to make sure that I have the right LinkedIn URL for somebody. If not, if the names don't match or the companies are completely off, I flag it. I have an idea that this is something that's probably incorrect. Pulling every piece of information you can, like take it, use it, summarize it, hand it to your teams if it's useful, figure out what actually matters to them, let them tell you if it's stuff that they're actually going to use. Make sure your SDRs or whoever is going out into the field are comfortable talking about what they are very comfortable talking about, or where they might need some training. And if it's not training, or what they're comfortable going through, and prioritize some things so that they're actually going to be able to take action on all of the data you're pulling. Because I certainly can feel sometimes like I'm just pulling everything, and I have to take a step back and make sure I'm making it usable and not just being data greedy and taking all of the data I can for current or later use. And that really goes to the why to sales for lead qualification. You need to understand from them what their point of view is, and you're going to have to explain to them as well, like if something comes in from a new source, what these people are looking at, what this kind of means. A lot of sales teams have adopted the use of chat GPT and things like that, but it's always on a one-off scale. They don't seem to be able to comprehend doing this at scale or pulling tons of information at once for different customers. ChatGPT.com, let me input this and then go from there. So that's something I'd be really careful about with your teams, is keeping that communication open whenever you are doing anything with AI, especially because we test, but you need to continue to test and teach them what to look out for. And our SDR team, when something is going off the rails, they tell me. When formatting starts to get weird with something that doesn't look right, they tell me so that I can get those things fixed. So we need to make some changes next time. ABM list building from a neutral party, I actually would kind of call this one scoring. So all of that data we're talking about, the news stories, all of these things, putting those into a score. I wouldn't use AI to score necessarily, but I use AI to scrape. And then I incorporate that information into a score if it's relevant to you. Like, they've acquired a company and you think that they're a really good fit because of X, Y, or Z. It's going to depend on what you're doing. Pull that information in, and maybe they get a big bump because you're able to use like all this news, all this stuff. It can be really hard to give that to somebody and tell them to run with it. One thing you can absolutely do is incorporate it into your existing systems so they understand what's going on a little bit better. Like, hey, this had a huge jump because of X, Y, or Z, and they know that they have a high score. I should go after them. So even if they don't understand some of that other stuff, they're going to understand that. All right. Yeah, there's a lot here. So you may as well just go through just click a ton. This was built, I apologize. This was something I repurposed all of your hard work that I did recently. I put up just one quick workflow for people. This is a collaboration between a number of departments. Ops is the two middle ones. We have marketing and we have sales. So when I'm talking about the account research, we let our teams actually like mark them themselves in some case. So I'm showcasing how they're like finding their target lists and stuff like that and communicating that to us. We do a good bit of this on our own without them marking it, but it gives them that opportunity to say, I need new information on this account. We create a trigger. If we haven't prioritized something already, then we usually run a flow in whatever AI system we're using, and that's going to scrape information on the person and on the account, and typically industry, anything we can get. Like I'll look through job postings to see if there's money, if they're actually investing in people, if they're not, like all these things, they will feed back into our scoring mechanisms. We also check for anomalies and flag. I already mentioned the LinkedIn names not matching. Things like, oh man, I was able to mark so many of our accounts that were acquired. Things like that. Like if I'm scraping your website, and your name isn't anywhere in your website, there's something wrong. We need to take a look at that. Or if it didn't load for some reason and it no longer exists, like how many companies do you have in your system that are completely gone? That one was huge. And actually, it was a lot. It was like, oh, wow, there are so many that have been acquired. And then we made a new process for absorbing all of those. And we do still use a human to look through when there's something very strange. We're starting to build out as we see what happens with this very standardized process that's checked time and time again. We are seeing that when this happens, it's usually this. We're going to be wrong once in a while, but this is low stakes and time consuming. So if we're wrong right now, you have 2,000 things that are wrong. If I implement this, maybe 4 of them are wrong. Like that's a number I don't care about. That's fine if our error rate is something like that. From there, we typically will run multi-vendor enrichment and update the data if something doesn't look right or we don't have what we need. And we're always marking triggers for the next step. You can see there's a little bit of a break here because what you do next could be a million different things. Our sales team is utilizing that data where it's relevant. I mentioned putting some of this information in the call scripts so they know what's going on. Our team is creating plumbing, building new processes from what we've learned. And we are also creating new insights, maybe making changes to whatever scoring we have to give more insight. And then marketing is able to actually resegment and see what people are interested in. So if you have too many nurture tracks, you're able to figure out what someone's a little bit more interested in based on their industry, their account, the contact. And if you can't find information on a company or on a person, fall back to the company. Put them in a nurture track that's more relevant to their industry. AI is going to be a lot better at looking through some of that stuff than you will because we're not going to take the time to do it.
We have a couple questions that are fantastic. One is, are you mostly using ChatGPT or what are you using throughout? Is it one tool or multiple?
Multiple. So I use our own LLM. I have used Copy AI for a while too. That was one of the first companies. They're good at doing things at scale, but you still have to iterate and make sure it makes sense to use. That's similar to Clay as well. I have started to build out my own integrations directly with the OpenAI API. So I'm doing things that way as well. So I'm seeing where I get the results I want.
From my standpoint, we rely really heavily at the RevOps Co-op on a Zapier connection to Clay. Because we're smaller, we don't tend to run into the cost prohibitive limits. So if you have a small data set, it can be cost effective. Also, OpenAI, Perplexity, I've dabbled with, and there's a ton of other tools I use from like a copywriting, documentation, email writing perspective. Dom, have you tinkered with any others?
Yeah, I've played around with the major players. In truth, out of our platform specifically, I've used the LLM embedded in our system. We have native connections to most major AI systems. So if customers have that, we can connect up to that and they can use it within their workflows and get those returns. For my personal usage, it's mainly been, like you said, kind of writing, kind of more thoughts, collection information from one of the kind of chat-based ones, as well as our internal LLM for the platform.
Do we have any guidelines in terms of volume of data an LLM can handle efficiency, like the LinkedIn URL scraping example? I have some thoughts, but I'll kick it over to you both.
Honestly, you're usually going to be limited by the platform. You might have 32,000 characters. I personally would want to cut some of that up. The main difference might be a call transcript. That would probably be the largest thing I would ever want to put in. Everything else, I'm less interested in putting that much information in, especially if there are a ton of different data points. You need it really specialized. Even when I'm doing call transcripts, I have different jobs asking for different things. One big mistake I notice is, okay, I want to know a summary of this, and I want this thing, and I want this information, I want this, and I want this and this. That's going to you're going to get the worst outputs that way. You need to be very clear and concise in what you want extracted from that data. And if you do that in separate steps, it can be cost prohibitive. It can be more expensive to do it that way, but you're going to get much better results that are a lot more accurate, in my experience, at least.
And there's some things to think through that I think sometimes people miss is like, how quickly do you need this data refreshed? Is this a speed to lead situation? Or is this something where we can group these into segments? Also think through really hard what all you actually want to process and what you can leave out, because it's really important to think, do you need to run an active context in companies through this? Depending on how you build this and structure it, you can hit API limits, which can be really detrimental to your entire organization and how they do their job. So really think through initially, what's the smallest population I can test with? Watch how that impacts your system and kind of go from there, would be my advice. Dom, do you want to add anything?
No, in truth, I'm always a proponent of getting things down to the smallest meaningful step or unit that you can versus expecting a long-winded prompt or data set to then give you a series of results. Starting small, keeping it efficient. Like you said, you may have more calls over time, but the data is you're gonna be able to see from A to B to C, and you'll be able to understand what it did, the troubleshoot should things go awry.
I think also when you're looking at that, think of it like enrichment. You're going to do some pieces more frequently than others. Some things you don't run until you have some indication that something is off. Doing this annually, do you really need to scrape somebody's website every year? No, you really don't. You can do it probably every few years, unless you have some indication that something's no longer there. Like, I got a bunch of hard bounces for somebody. I think they might have left the company. Most of you have probably done this a long time. Just use your common sense like you do any other time. And I'm super cheap, so I understand that worry for sure.
I knew we were friends. So I blew past that last slide. I promise we did cover the content throughout. Thank you for all of the questions. We are out of time. Dom and Courtney, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. This was amazing. Have a great day, everyone.